As someone who gives out advice on buying watches for a living, I tend to notice trends that in turn become rules that can help people avoid potentially expensive mistakes. That's what this video is about. A list of situations I've noticed that often make for poor luxury watch purchases. And by poor purchase, I mean a watch that you either won't wear and enjoy, or will not hold monetary value, or even both. I'm passionate about this topic because I believe that when someone buys a luxury timepiece, they are rewarding themselves, so they should enjoy it to the fullest extent. That means that the luxury watch experience isn't just about spending a lot of money. You still need to go through the process of actually determining what type of watch is a good fit for you, as well as choosing a specific watch, as there are so many seemingly similar ones at any price range. Exceptions exist to most of the suggestions which I'm going to provide, meaning that there are times when watches that fit the following description are a good buy, even if you're spending a lot. With that said, if you don't want your next luxury watch purchase to turn out poorly, follow the advice to avoid some common mistakes. Before starting, do not forget to like and subscribe. Number 1. Dials that are difficult to read. Many watch executives bought into the idea that people don't buy watches to tell the time anymore. Though that's technically a false statement, it ignores the obvious fact that once someone puts a timepiece on, it only stays on if it's actually legible. What it boils down to is the fact that we only use tools that are decent at their job. And even if someone initially buys a watch as a status item, once they start wearing it, they'll actually start using it to tell the time. People don't realize how useful watches can be until they start wearing them. The only problem is if you wear a watch, regardless of why you put it on in the first place, and it doesn't allow you to read the time with a quick glance. It's even worse if you need to carefully study the dial or twist your hand around in the light to try and read the time precisely. No matter how expensive a watch is, if it's not easily legible, then the wearer doesn't have much of a reason to put it on. Of course, you might still put it on as a status symbol, but there's so many watches that are both recognizable and legible. Number 2. New watches with prices based mostly on jewelry value. Anytime we cover watches with diamonds or other precious stones, some people inevitably cry that they're in bad taste and gaudy. I'm personally not opposed to the aesthetic of many men's watches that emphasize their jewelry aspect, but I can't always stand by their price. Many luxury watch brands use precious stones to justify greatly increasing the retail price of a watch, and they often do so at a level higher than the actual market value these precious stones add. That means brand new watches with precious stones can experience incredible depreciation. Why? Well, like I said, when a retail price is based on what a company wants to charge and not based on what most consumers are willing to spend, then the price of the watch will drop once the watch is put back on the market and sold as second-hand or otherwise. Furthermore, in the past, items adorned with precious stones were expensive because the stones were extremely rare. But today, such gems aren't that rare anymore. Sure, large diamonds are still expensive, but a quick search on the internet can demonstrate how easy it is to buy almost any precious stone. If, for whatever reason, you feel compelled to purchase a brand new watch with a lot of precious stones from a famous luxury watchmaker, then I won't stop you. In fact, kudos to you for being able to afford something like that. If, however, you're interested in timepieces laden with precious stones, but want your money to be spent wisely, opting for the pre-owned route is going to give you a huge discount. And if you ever want to resell it, you won't experience as large of a loss compared to if you had sold a watch you bought brand new. Number 3. Watches with value derived, mostly from a story. People who read my advice on a regular basis know that I often discuss what I call the inherent value of a watch. I spend a lot of time talking about inherent value specifically because I want to help people avoid watches whose prices seem to be derived from some alternative source of value. Inherent value is derived from facts about the quality, performance, and art contained in a particular object that many people can usually agree adds value to an item. If you spend a lot of money on something that isn't expensive because of inherent value, you're essentially buying into market trends. Watches with value derived from a story are highly susceptible to changing human moods. Unless you are a seasoned and incredibly skilled day trader or hold a similar job, I wouldn't suggest any friend of mine to bet on human emotion as the source of value for anything. When moods change, so do the market values of items that are based on demand derived solely from human emotion. As a result, the price of these watches are highly volatile. If this sounds a bit abstract, I'll bring up two settings where the story behind a watch accounts for a large percentage of its supposed value: the auction world and the vintage watch world. Spend some time watching auctions and you'll notice a trend with the important vintages watches. Much of the time, the description of the watch has little to do with the watch itself and more to do with the story behind it. This is cause for suspicion, so if you're a potential buyer at an auction, be careful about how much you're willing to spend. Too often, stories about watches, especially historic ones, are made up. Sometimes the people selling the watches don't even know whether the stories they're telling are actually accurate. There are also unscrupulous salespeople looking for ways to deceive unsuspecting targets. These people can come up with fake histories about a watch or even add or replace parts in a watch that make them no longer authentic. Such sellers are also guilty of regularly manipulating buyers into feeling as though they are purchasing an important watch or something which is particularly meaningful in some historical context. It isn't that these special watches don't exist, but rather that they are exceedingly rare and thus rarely circulate on the market. Just because a celebrity allegedly owned a watch usually doesn't mean that the watch itself is worth more. Number 4. Complicated watches from dead brands. We mourn many old, interesting, and innovative high-end watch brands that simply couldn't back up their creative spirit with business acumen. Unfortunately, when a watch company goes under, it tends to cause problems for customers if that company is the only one who knows how to make and/or fix their products. Therefore, my advice is to avoid buying mechanically interesting and complicated watches manufactured by companies that are no longer around. The risk is that if it breaks, you might have no options to fix it, and even if you do, it might be very expensive. Mechanical watches are, at their core, small machines, so they can break and will often need servicing. If you buy something with a complicated mechanism produced by a brand that hasn't been active for years, who can fix or service the watch? Some brands that went under have maintained relationships with watch service professionals to ensure that clients who did purchase their watches can have them readily serviced. Thus, just because a brand is no longer around doesn't mean you are immediately out of luck when trying to fix a watch from said brand. Still, it's a long shot. With that said, there are plenty of luxury watches from brands that no longer exist that are safe to purchase and enjoy. Usually, these watches have movements produced by third parties, such as ETA. Most watchmakers could easily service these types of common movements. However, if you buy watches that have exotic in-house movements with many complications, it's a lot harder to find someone who can expertly repair it. Thus, I mostly suggest to people that if they buy vintages watches, they should turn to ones with more common movements for their reliability. Complicated watches can be fun, but they're sometimes not worth the hassle. Number 5. Watches that hurt. Avoid watches that are so uncomfortable they hurt to wear. The obvious reason is because you won't actually wear an uncomfortable watch, which sort of defeats the point of spending money on a luxury item. It is actually very easy to find watches that you enjoy aesthetically, but when you wear it, it's painful. Oftentimes, a watch will not feel uncomfortable until after you've worn it for a while. The good news is that a while can mean just a few minutes, so this is something you can test even in a retail store environment. How can you test if a watch is going to be so uncomfortable that you won't want to wear it? A good place to start is to put the watch on your wrist snugly enough so that it doesn't move up and down the length of your wrist. Then simply walk around for a few minutes and act as if you were performing ordinary activities. Even if you don't notice any discomfort, take the watch off and inspect your wrist. You might find areas where parts of the watch or strap are pressed into your skin and causing red spots. Over time, wearing a watch like this can cause a lot of discomfort, and life is also too short to wear uncomfortable watches.